Shocked doesn't even begin to describe how I feel.
How do you feel about them taking over the building right now?
I think that their cause is a just cause, and I hope that the administration really hears their demands. I think they're just demands.
Do you feel like it was right to hold 3 of the janitor workers hostage within inside of the building?
I think that's a really false narrative.
That's what the janitors are saying, that they weren't allowed to leave.
I think that that's a really false narrative.
Even if the janitors are saying that, you're saying that that's not true.
I think that it's a really false narrative that the students took anyone hostage.
How do you feel about some of the Jewish students saying that they don't feel safe here on campus?
I think that this is also a really false narrative that's being promoted.
False narrative?
I just came back.
So this is what happened.
Can you get out of my face, please?
So
yes, I thought I have seen it all. Before we go into these full videos, breaking news. Biden is considering bringing Palestinians from G into United States as refugees. According to CBS, federal U.S. agencies are figuring out how to resettle Palestinians from G. According to the report, one proposals will use the United States Refugee Admission Program to bring in Palestinians with U.S. ties who may have escaped into Egypt. Those who pass the eligibility requirement will then fly into the United States with refugee status, receive housing assistance, and have a path towards citizenship.
This news exclusively on CBS News. The Biden administration is considering a plan to allow some Palestinian refugees to come here to the United States. That's according to internal federal government documents that were obtained by CBS's Camilo Montoya Galvez. According to the plan, some Palestinians fleeing the war would be offered a permanent safe haven here in the U.S. And one option under consideration is to allow those who have immediate family members who are either American citizens or permanent residents to enter the country if they pass various background checks first. The plans would require coordination with Egypt, which has so far refused to allow large numbers of people.
That is not all.
Hey y'all, seeing a lot about the police response to the protests at Columbia, but not seeing anyone really talk about what the Columbia students are protesting for. They have published their list of demands. I'm going to read them to you now. The student organization that is negotiating with the administration is called Columbia University Apartheid Divest. They are calling for Columbia to divest all of Columbia's finances, including the $13.6 billion endowment, which is managed by a university-owned investment firm, from companies and institutions that profit from their relationship with Israel. They identified the companies specifically as BlackRock, an asset management company with ties to weapons manufacturing, Airbnb, which has offered rentals in the occupied West Bank, Caterpillar, whose bulldozers are the one is using, and Google, which has faced protests from staffers over Project Nimbus, which provides artificial intelligence services to Israel. Demand number 2 is an academic boycott. They want the school to sever academic ties with it, including the Global Center in Tel Aviv, the dual degree program with Tel Aviv University, and all study abroad programs, fellowships, and research collaborations with the academic institutions. They are asking for amnesty for Palestinian students and their allies on and off campus, including through university disciplinary processes. They're demanding the defunding of public safety and for the university to disclose and sever all ties with the NYPD. Their fourth demand is for the school to release a public statement calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, to denounce the ongoing campaign against the Palestinian people, and call on government officials to do so as well. And their last demand is actually an amendment to a student protest that was started in 2008 about campus expansion. They are demanding no land grabs, whether in Harlem, on the ancestral lands of the Lenape, or in Palestine. Communication between the students and the administration has broken down, but calls for divestment in the past have worked.
Yes, when you take a look at what is going on, I have seen people actually coming out, especially Democrat. This lady who just read this out is a strong Democrat. I follow TikTok video she put out, and she just in line and in support of what is going on. I think we need to shift the framing of this college protest. Sonet Austin said, I think college campuses have been the place for anti-war protests for as far as I remember. I think recent protests haven't even reached the scales of the major student protests that we saw in the late 1960s against the Vietnam War, or even the 1980s against South Africa practice of apartheid. And so I think these are anti-war protests, she claimed, and I think it's very distressing that we are framing that.
I think it's, I think we need to shift the framing of these college protests, in fact, in my view. I think college campuses have been the place for anti-war protests for as far as I can remember. I think recent protests haven't even reached the scale of the major student protests that we saw in the late 1960s against the Vietnam War, or even the 1980s against South Africa's practice of apartheid. We saw calls during apartheid to divest from South African companies, and that was very successful. Nelson Mandela said he believed that's what led, in many respects, to South Africa being freed from that system. And so I think these are anti-war protests, and I think it's very distressing that we are framing these as pro-Palestinian protests or pro-Israeli protests. These are anti-war protests, and what they are, the students that I have spoken to at many of the Ivy League schools, and a student that I did speak to also at Emory, where a professor was thrown to the ground.
Yes, I don't know if you've noticed this. Democrat tone is changing. They are looking at these like this is peaceful.
Does the White House support peaceful protesters at Columbia or elsewhere being threatened with being removed from the school or being put on discipline or probation?
So,
is that, do you think that is fair?
So, got to be super mindful. These are institutions. Some of them are private, some of them are public, and it is up to their leadership, university leadership and colleges, to make that decision. Not going to weigh in on that from here. We're going to continue to say all Americans have the right to peacefully protest. At the same time, we have to call out any hateful rhetoric that we hear. Anti-Semitism is wrong, and so we're going to continue to do that.
Yes, in another video, reporters grade Columbia student after she demands the university help feed protesters occupying the Hamilton Hall. It seems like you are saying we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over the building. Now, will you please bring us some food?
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that.
Yes, when I take a look at what is happening, it is frightening. It started gradually. I've seen a lot of people, Democrats, coming out to support what is happening now in different campuses. If care is not taken, it will escalate to something else. I've watched a lot of videos which I cannot even bring on this platform. Extremely concerning.
I haven't said anything. I'm sorry. I do have to do this. It is one of the great rights as an American to stand up and say something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what your color is, if you're a woman, man, doesn't matter. And we must teach our people how to be on the lookout. Part of our problem is the media takes what is the best clickbait. So you see the same posters or you see the same people, but you don't see the folks who are doing peaceful stuff and saying, here's what we want to do.
Yes, and that is not all. Take a look at these.
I'm not saying there aren't sincere passions about Gaza, especially among people from the region, but social justice warriors, for a lot of them it seems like it's more about the warrioring than about whatever the cause is. Are you really speaking truth to power, or do you just think you look cool in a cafeteria? You have to be pretty dumb.
We got lucky because if this thing that's going on right now, well, actually, I think this thing that's going on right now couldn't be going on right now without the influence of the internet.
Right.
The internet has like created this mind virus that's sweeping through college campuses and also the universities and the Marxist philosophies that they've been pushing in universities.